What did Catherine the Great really look like? History and facial reconstructions. Royalty. Now, Catherine II of Russia, commonly known as Catherine the Great, ruled from 1762 until her death in 1796, and is often considered one of the most influential monarchs in Russian history. Her reign saw territorial expansion, cultural flourishing, and significant administrative reforms, earning her a lasting place among Europe's most powerful rulers. Yet despite her prominence, there remains a persistent fascination with how she truly looked. Portraits from the era depict a regal, composed woman, but were they accurate reflections of her appearance, or idealized representations designed to project power and authority? This question has prompted modern historians, artists, and forensic experts to attempt facial reconstructions based on surviving portraits, descriptions, and even her remains. In this article, we delve into the historical records, artistic interpretations, and scientific efforts aimed at uncovering what Catherine the Great really looked like. The iconic image, Catherine, in painted portraiture. Prominent among these was Johann Baptist von Lampe the Elder, George Christoph Gruth, and Fyodor Rokotov. These artists portrayed Catherine in various stages of her life, from youthful consort to formidable empress. However, these images often emphasized grandeur over realism, featuring elaborate wigs, imperial robes, and expressions of stoic authority. In many of these portraits, Catherine appears fair-skinned, with high cheekbones, a pointed chin, and bright blue or grey eyes. Her nose is straight and well-proportioned, and her lips are full, but often depicted in a neutral line, suggesting control and composure. Still, art historians caution against taking these depictions at face value. Portraiture in the 18th century was not photography, explains Dr. Elena Smolarskaya, a specialist in Russian court art. It was propaganda. Every feature was chosen to convey legitimacy, divinity, and strength. One notable example is the famous 1780 portrait by Vigilius Erichsen, which shows Catherine in full coronation regalia. Her expression is serene but unyielding. Her posture is regal, her gaze forward, a symbol of confidence and divine right. But does it show her true likeness? To answer that, scholars have turned to alternative sources, including private letters, eyewitness accounts, and more recently, forensic science. Eyewitness descriptions, what contemporaries said about her appearance. Beyond the paintings, several contemporaries left written descriptions of Catherine that offer additional clues to her physical presence. Frederick the Great of Prussia, who corresponded extensively with Catherine and admired her intellect, once described her as having a fine figure and an attractive grace. He also noted her expressive eyes and lively manner, which contributed to her charm and persuasive abilities. The French philosopher Voltaire, another admirer, wrote that she possessed a mind sharper than a diamond and a beauty that matched her intellect. Others, however, were less flattering. British diplomat Sir Robert Murray Keith described her as not handsome, noting that her features were ordinary, though animated by intelligence. Another British envoy, Sir James Harris, later Earl of Malmesbury, remarked upon meeting her in 1765 that while not beautiful, she had an impressive presence and a look of command. These mixed accounts suggest that Catherine's allure lay not simply in classical beauty, but in her bearing, charisma, and intellect. Her appearance may not have been conventionally striking, but her personality made her unforgettable. The role of age and health in her appearance. Like all people, Catherine changed physically over time. In her youth, she was slender and reportedly quite pretty. However, as she aged, weight gain became evident, particularly after her 40s. This transformation can be seen in her portraiture, where early images show a slim woman with delicate features, while later ones reveal fuller cheeks and a heavier physique. Health issues likely played a role in these changes. Catherine suffered from gout, rheumatism, and back pain in her later years, which may have affected her posture and overall energy levels. There were also rumors, largely unfounded, about her suffering from other ailments, some propagated by political enemies eager to undermine her reputation. Her personal physician, Dr. John Rogerson, described her as generally healthy, except for occasional bouts of illness. However, he did note that her lifestyle, long hours, stress, and limited exercise contributed to her gradual physical decline. Could we see Catherine through other means? Given the limitations of painted portraits and subjective textual descriptions, attempts have been made to reconstruct Catherine's face using forensic techniques. One major no official autopsy was performed upon her death in 1796, and her remains were not exhumed for extensive study until the Soviet period. However, during the 1920s, under Lenin's directive to open royal tombs, Catherine's body was examined. According to reports, her corpse was remarkably well preserved due to the embalming practices of the time. Measurements were taken, and her height was recorded as approximately 164 centimeters, 5 feet 5 inches, above average for women of that era. Her face was described as still recognizable, albeit somewhat distorted by age and preservation methods. Russian anatomist Mikhail Gerasimov, considered the father of modern forensic facial reconstruction, later worked on several Russian imperial remains in the mid-20th century. Though he focused primarily on Ivan the Terrible and Peter the Huns, Peter the Great, his methods laid the groundwork for future efforts. Modern efforts in facial reconstruction. In the digital age, new technologies have allowed researchers to revisit old cases with fresh tools. In recent years, teams of forensic anthropologists, historians, and computer graphics experts have collaborated on projects to reconstruct the faces of historical figures, including Catherine the Great. Using 3D imaging software and data derived from her preserved skull, which remains interred in the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, researchers have attempted to create realistic models of her face. One such reconstruction was conducted by the Russian State Historical Museum in collaboration with international experts in 2019. They used CT scans and historical measurements to build a model showing Catherine in her late 60s, the age at which she died. The result was striking. Unlike the stern, powdered wig image often associated with her, this reconstruction showed a softer, more human visage. Her eyes remained alert and intelligent, but fatigue and age were clearly visible in the lines around her mouth and forehead. Her nose appeared slightly longer than in portraits, and her jowls sagged slightly, consistent with her reported weight gain and aging. Another effort by the BBC in 2021 brought together a team of British and Russian specialists to compare multiple sources, including wax death masks believed to be casts of Catherine's face. These masks, stored in the archives of the Hermitage Museum, provided valuable data on her facial structure. When combined with soft tissue analysis and comparisons with living relatives, though no direct descendants survived, the team produced a detailed rendering that suggested a blend of dignity and vulnerability. An elderly woman who had spent decades in the spotlight yet retained traces of her former elegance. Debates and disputes. How accurate are these reconstructions? Despite their scientific basis, facial reconstructions are not without controversy. Experts agree that while bone structure provides a foundation, soft tissues, such as muscle thickness, fat distribution, and skin texture, are subject to interpretation. Moreover, factors like age-related changes, disease, and post-mortem distortion complicate the process. Additionally, some scholars argue that focusing too heavily on Catherine's physical appearance detracts from her real legacy. We should remember her for her policies, her patronage of the arts, her diplomacy, not whether her nose was 2 millimeters longer than in a painting, says Dr. Olga Morozova, a historian at Moscow State University. Nonetheless, the public continues to be fascinated by these reconstructions, which make distant historical figures feel more human and relatable. The cultural impact of imagining Catherine. Beyond academia, the image of Catherine the Great has been reshaped numerous times in popular culture. From operas to novels to films, each generation has reimagined her according to its own values and aesthetics. In the 1934 film The Scarlet Empress, directed by Josef von Sternberg and starring Marlene Dietrich, Catherine is depicted as both seductive and calculating, a femme fatale wielding power through sexuality. More recently, the 2019-2021 television series The Great, starring Elle Fanning, portrays her as rebellious, witty, and emotionally complex, offering a sharp contrast to the rigid iconography of traditional portraits. These portrayals reflect changing attitudes toward female leadership, sexuality, and historical truth. While they take liberties with facts, they serve a purpose, keeping Catherine relevant and engaging new audiences. Conclusion: a face behind the crown. So, what did Catherine the Great really look like? The answer is not simple. She was undoubtedly a woman of presence, tall for her time, elegant and commanding. Her portraits were often idealized, crafted to bolster her status as an enlightened despot. Her contemporaries described her as intelligent and charismatic, rather than classically beautiful. And modern reconstructions suggest that, like all humans, she bore the marks of time and experience. Ultimately, perhaps the most accurate portrait of Catherine is not found in oil paint or bone structure, but in the enduring impact she left on Russia and the world. Her vision expanded the empire, fostered Enlightenment ideals, and elevated the role of women in leadership. And yet the quest to visualize her remains compelling, a reflection of our desire to connect with the past, to see the people behind the history, and to imagine the faces behind the crown. Further reading and resources: Hughes Lindsay, Catherine the Great, a biography, Yale University Press, 1998. Massey, Robert K. Catherine the Great, Portrait of a Woman, Random House, 2011, The Faces of Power, Reconstructing Royal Appearances Through Science and Art, Russian State Historical Museum, 2019. BBC documentary, Reconstructing the Past, Faces of the Tsars, 2021, Morozova, Olga, Image and Identity in the Russian Court, Slavic Review, Volume 77, Number 3, 2018, Royalty. Now brings you closer to the lives, legends, and legacies of history's most fascinating rulers. Explore the truths behind the crowns and discover the humanity beneath the history.